All right. Well, as we continue our series on the architecture of reality, we've talked about Aristotle's view of knowledge. We've talked about Machiavelli's shift to a, a nihilistic metaphysic of society and his political realism. And uh, C.S. Lewis makes a really interesting point about the way that we come up with the way we reason to our convictions. And one of the things that he says is that we rarely reason to a conviction and then start having it. He says we usually gain a conviction and then we use reason to backfill and support the conviction that we already have. And one of the things that's interesting is this with this understanding of metaphysical nihilism, which is that nature that there isn't a nature to reality or a nature to the spheres that we live our life in, or we don't have a nature, but that instead force or power ends up forming everything into its particular shape. So things don't grow out into their shape because of what they are. They grow, they are put into their shape by the forces around them. Well, what happens is in the Enlightenment, you have metaphysical nihilism growing up is minimally in the sphere of the secular society, and then the different philosophers come along and they try to backfill through reason and understanding of why it is that we have that. And one of the people that does that is Immanuel Kant, um, because Immanuel Kant wants to take both senses of the word realist and be able to embrace them both. So in his book, A Critique of Pure Reason, he wants to take the metaphysical nihilism in the sphere of the secular world, but then a philosophical realism in the sphere of of things that don't fit into our secular society. And so he ends up making a distinction between two realms that have two different rules of knowledge and two different rules for formation. And so he makes a distinction between the phenomena and the noumena. The phenomena is the objects that as we experience them, mediated through our senses, organized by our mind, things like space and time, causality, the world as we experience it, the world of phenomena. And that's how it's the world that we know in and interact with. And then noumena is things in themselves, right? So he creates a two-tiered understanding of reality, things as they exist independently of our perception, of our conceptual framework. So that there are that noumena are it's things in and of itself untouched by human perception. And human knowledge, he says, is in what we can actually call knowledge is limited to the phenomena, limited to the things that we can touch and taste and feel. We can think about things in themselves, things in the noumena, but that's a realm of the mind, a realm that where we can't know directly because our perception, our cognition, everything like that is structured by the categories of what we experience, causality our senses. Our mind imposes structure onto raw sense data. Um, so it's always filtered and shaped by the framework of our mind. So there isn't something that in reality holds it together that we can experience. Instead, our mind imposes onto reality an order, right? So it's that same the metaphysical nihilism, the nihilism about the things don't have a nature, but that what the force that is applied is the stories that we tell about nature, right? We structure things into sensible a sensible understanding. Things don't have a sensible understanding. We supply the sensible understanding, and but then noumena, the other tier of knowledge, it can't be directly known. Um, so it's something that's beyond our experience, and um, Kant wants to say it's necessary because otherwise you really can't call anything knowledge, but it's beyond our experience. Um, so it reminds us that our the knowledge that we have doesn't actually encompass reality, right? That's Kant's argument. So the noumenal reality is the reality that morality sits in, for example. So he tries to argue that there's a way to have reality in the cause and effect world that doesn't, where we don't really have access to um, we don't really have access to reality, but we see throughout history that um, it doesn't really hold. So we can think about things in themselves, but we can't have knowledge of things in themselves in any sort of direct way. It's always knowledge um, that is either reasoned to, or that any kind of ultimate reality that's behind or beneath or underneath our experience is actually unknowable, because our condition, our cognition, or our understanding is really bound by the conditions of human perception and understanding. So this metaphysical nihilism um, is true in our experience, that power and the mind and human action gives shape to natureless matter around us, to natureless experience, to natureless um, sense data. Uh, so uh, kind of the grinding force of reality, uh, we supply reasoning to it. So what's really interesting is uh, in his day, Kant's most popular book was his book about um, it was about Newtonian physics, about how the world is really this great machinery, and so the kind of the world is this clock that just ticks along, doesn't care about us, and uh, so in Finch's biography of Chesterton, he quotes Chesterton saying, "It's true that nobody makes a new earth without first making a new heaven," right? And that's actually true of Kant, right? He mechanizes, he takes the understanding of the cosmic liturgy and he turns it instead into a mechanized universe in his imagination and in the imagination of a lot of people around him, and says that empiricism only gets us to the mechanism, right? That if we're honest, all we can really see is just this mechanized universe that happens to move in predictable ways, like a clock. But we don't actually have any access beyond the phenomena, beyond the phenomenal realm, and we add meaning to that. Now, Kant is he's trying with reason to save truth and goodness and beauty from what sees as the obvious conclusion of empiricism, the obvious conclusion that the only knowledge that we have is we can't have any knowledge beyond just our senses, or beyond what the imperial uh, beyond what we can see, touch, taste, feel, and hear. So, if we go back to Aristotle's categories of knowledge, what Kant says is, okay, we can only really have productive knowledge, right? He agrees with Machiavelli on that. We can only, but he says, but can I, through reason, save theoretical knowledge, save knowledge of truth and goodness and beauty? And that's the project that he sets himself to. So that's he's not a a bad guy trying to destroy the world. He's actually seeing the conclusions of what's gone before, and he's trying to rescue the world. But his attempt to rescue the world is to rescue a mechanistic universe from meaninglessness. Right? So he agrees that it's a mechanistic universe, and then he tries to rescue it from meaninglessness by writing huge, really boring, difficult books on truth and goodness and beauty, right? That's what he spends his life doing. Is how can we rescue truth, goodness, and beauty from the grinding realities of fate, from the grinding realities of a mechanistic universe? And he does it by moving everything up into the head, and then the head of mankind or the mind of mankind, and then trying to elevate the mind of mankind, um, with sort of a leap from phenomena to noumenal. And unfortunately, the modernism, well, the Enlightenment project, and then modernism particularly buys into this, um, division between two kinds of truth, right? There's truth that is the direct knowledge of a thing that we get to by faith, and then there's the truth that we can get to through our direct senses. But this division into the two kinds of truth, and this understanding of having to leap between the two, is really destructive in the long run. And most of us assume it without knowing about it, that there's two different spheres of knowledge, right? So there's religious knowledge, and then there's practical knowledge, or there's theoretical knowledge, and then there's productive knowledge, right? That we only have those sorts of, there's two kinds of knowledge, and they work on different systems, and that you can't get to uh, any sort of theoretical knowledge by means of the practical knowledge, right? So you no longer look at the birds. You no longer look at a dove and see a picture of the soul, or the butterfly. So the word in Greek for soul is butterfly, right? The butterfly is seen as a picture of the soul, so the Greek words are the same. We don't we don't have that sort of understanding anymore, because we don't believe in that the world around us has a nature that reflects anything, or a nature that reflects beyond itself. We no longer see the world having any sort of allegorical relationship to truth, because allegory is not a true means of practical knowledge. And there's a division between the reality we see around us and the knowledge we can have of that, and any sort of noumenal knowledge. You know, uh, capital T truth is the way Francis Schaeffer divides it out, which I think is a really helpful way of thinking. We can know truths, but we can't know the truth, capital T truth, because of this division that Kant makes. So, you can see the way. So this is when metaphysics starts to disappear from the conversation, and everything becomes a discussion about knowledge. What can we know? How can we know? Can we know? Because as soon as you take the nature of things and take theoretical knowledge out of the conversation, then the question is, well, can we know anything? And all the way down to some of the most popular philosophers of the 20th century, the conversation is really about knowledge, and how is it that our knowledge and understanding puts or supplies the what is needed for knowledge to be able to be considered true knowledge. So once you take metaphysics out of the conversation, everything becomes about epistemology, which is the study of knowledge. And that takes us right up, all the way up to postmodernism, because postmodernism is the backing out of the modernist project that says, well, we can actually lay a foundation for knowledge, and then build real true knowledge on top of it. The postmodernists finally get to the point where they say, if there's only such thing as productive knowledge, there's no such thing as theoretical knowledge. If we are the ground of truth, then there's really no such thing as truth. There's only truths. So it's important and interesting, but it also ends up having significant practical effects on how we live our lives.